Hello, this is Morel with Study Coach and narrating the story of the Mayor of Casterbridge. New story, the Mayor of Casterbridge. And by the way, please subscribe to the channel and please share. I know that you have heard those words so many times, but I still will say, please, if you can, please subscribe and please share. The Mayor of Casterbridge. One evening of late summer, before the 19th century had reached 1/3 of its span, a young man and woman, the latter carrying a child, were approaching the large village of Weydon Priors in Upper Wessex on foot. They were plainly but not ill-clad, though the thick hoar of dust which had accumulated on their shoes and garments from an obviously long journey lent a disadvantageous shabbiness to their appearance just now. The man was of fine figure, swarthy, and stern in aspect, and he showed in profile a facial angle so slightly inclined as to be almost perpendicular. He wore a short jacket of brown corduroy, newer than the remainder of his suit, which was a fustian waistcoat with white horn buttons, breeches of the same, tanned legs, and a straw hat overlaid with black glazed canvas. At his back he carried by a looped strap a rush basket, from which protruded at one end the crutch of a hay knife, a wimble for hay bonds being also visible in the aperture. His measured, springless walk was the walk of the skilled countryman, as distinct from the desultory shamble of the general labourer, while in the turn and plant of each foot there was further a dogged and cynical indifference personal to himself, showing its presence even in the regularly interchanging fustian folds, now in the left leg, now in the right, as he paced along. What was really peculiar, however, in this couple's progress, and would have attracted the attention of any casual observer otherwise disposed to overlook them, was the perfect silence they preserved. They walked side by side in such a way as to suggest afar off the low, easy, confidential chat of people full of reciprocity. But on closer view, it could be discerned that the man was reading, or pretending to read, a ballot sheet which he kept before his eyes with some difficulty by the hand that was passed through the basket strap. Whether this apparent cause were the real cause, or whether it were an assumed one to escape an intercourse that would have been irksome to him, nobody but himself could have said precisely. But his taciturnity was unbroken, and the woman enjoyed no society whatever from his presence. Virtually, she walked the highway alone, save for the child she bore. Sometimes the man's bent elbow almost touched her shoulder, for she kept as close to his side as was possible without actual contact, but she seemed to have no idea of taking his arm, nor he of offering it. And far from exhibiting surprise at his ignoring silence, she appeared to receive it as a natural thing. If any word at all were uttered by the little group, it was an occasional whisper of the woman to the child, a tiny girl in short clothes and blue boots of knitted yarn, and the murmured babble of the child in reply. The chief, almost the only attraction of the young woman's face was its mobility. When she looked down sideways to the girl, she became pretty and even handsome, particularly that in the action her features caught slantwise the rays of the strongly coloured sun, which made transparencies of her eyelids and nostrils and set fire on her lips. When she plodded on in the shade of the hedge, silently thinking, she had the hard, half apathetic expression of one who deems anything possible at the hands of time and chance, except, perhaps, fair play. The first phase was the work of nature. The second, probably, of civilization. That the man and woman were husband and wife, and the parents of the girl in arms, there could be little doubt. No other than such relationship would have accounted for the atmosphere of stale familiarity which the trio carried along with them like a nimbus as they moved down the road. The wife mostly kept her eyes fixed ahead, though with little interest. The scene, for that matter, being one that might have been matched at almost any spot in any county in England at this time of the year. A road neither straight nor crooked, neither level nor hilly, bordered by hedges, trees, and other vegetation, which had entered the blackened green stage of colour that the doomed leaves passed through on their way to dingy and yellow and red. The grassy margin of the bank and the nearest hedgerow boughs were powdered by the dust that had been stirred over them by hasty vehicles. The same dust as it lay on the road, deadening their footfalls like a carpet, and this, with the aforesaid total absence of conversation, allowed every extraneous sound to be heard. For a long time there was none, beyond the voice of a weak bird singing a trite old evening song that might doubtless have been heard on the hill at the same hour, and with the same self trills, quavers, and breathes at any sunset of that season for centuries untold. But as they approached the village, sundry distant shouts and rattles reached their ears from some elevated spot in that direction, as yet screened from view by the foliage. When the outlining houses of Weydon Priors could just be described, the family group was met by a turnip hoer, with his hoe on his shoulder and his dinner bag suspended from it. The reader promptly glanced up. "Any trade doing here?" he asks, phlegmatically, designating the village in his van by a wave of the broadsheet. And thinking the labourer did not understand him, he added, "Anything in the hay trussing line?" The turnip hoer had already begun shaking his head. "Why, save the man, what wisdom's in him that should come to Weydon for a job of that sort this time of year?" "Then, is there any house to let? A little small new cottage just to build it, or such like?" asked the other. The pessimist still maintained a negative. "Pulling down is more the nature of Weedon. There were 5 houses cleared away last year, and 3 this. And the folk nowhere to go, no, not so much as a thatched hurdle. That's the way of Weydon Priors." The hay trusser, which he obviously was, nodded with some superciliousness. Looking towards the village, he continued, "There is something going on here, however, is there not?" "Aye, 'tis fair day. though what you hear now is little more than the clatter and scurry of getting away the money of children and fools. For the real business is done earlier than this. I've been working within sound of all day, but I didn't go up. Not I. 'Twas no business of mine. The trusser and his family proceeded on their way, and soon entered the fair field, which showed standing places and pens where many hundreds of horses and sheep had been exhibited and sold in the forenoon, but were now in great part taken away. At present, as their informant had observed, but little real business remained on hand, the chief being the sale by auction of a few inferior animals that could not otherwise be disposed of, and had been absolutely refused by the better class of traders, who came and went early. Yet the crowd was denser now than during the morning hours, and the frivolous contingent of visitors, including journeymen out for a holiday, a stray soldier or two come on furlough, village shopkeepers, and the like, having latterly flocked in, persons whose activities found a congenial field among the peep shows, toy stands, waxworks, inspired monsters, disinterested medical men who travelled for the public good, timber riggers, knick-knack vendors and readers of fate. Neither of our pedestrians had much heart for these things, and they looked around for a refreshment tent among the many which dotted the down. Two, which stood nearest to them in the ochreous haze of expiring sunlight, seemed almost equally inviting. One was formed of new milk-hued canvas and bore red flags on its summit. It announced good home-brewed beer, ale and cider. The other was less new. A little iron stovepipe came out of it at the back, and in front appeared the placard, Good Furmity sold here. The man mentally weighed the two inscriptions and inclined to the former tent. No, the other one, said the woman. I always like furmity, and so does Elizabeth Jane, and so will you. It is nourishing after a long hard day. I've never tasted it, said the man. However, he gave way to her representations, and they entered the furmity booth forthwith. A rather numerous company appeared within, seated at the long, narrow tables that ran down the tent on each side. At the upper end stood a stove containing a charcoal fire over which hung a large three-legged crock, sufficiently polished round the rim to show that it was made of bell metal. A haggish creature of about 50 presided in a white apron, which, as it threw an air of respectability over her, as far as it extended, was made so wide as to reach nearly round her waist. She slowly stirred the contents of the pot. The dull scrape of her large spoon was audible throughout the tent, as she thus kept from burning the mixture of corn in the grain, flour, milk, raisins, currants, and what not that composed the antiquated slop in which she dealt. Vessels holding the separate ingredients stood on a wide cloth table of boards and trestles close by. The young man and woman ordered a basin each of the mixture, steaming hot, and sat down to consume it at leisure. This was very well so far, for furmity, as the woman had said, was nourishing, and as proper a food as could be obtained within the four seas, though to those not accustomed to it, the grains of wheat swollen as large as lemon pips which floated on its surface might have a deterrent effect at first. But there was more in that tent than met the cursory glance, and the man with the instinct of a perverse character scented it quickly. After a mincing attack on his bowl, he watched the hag's proceedings from the corner of his eye and saw the game she played. He winked to her and passed up his basin in reply to her nod, when she took a bottle from under the table, slyly measured out a quantity of its contents, and tipped the same into the man's furmity. The liquor poured in was rum. The man as slyly sent back money in payment. He found the concoction thus strongly laced much more to his satisfaction than it had been in its natural state. His wife had observed the proceedings with much uneasiness, but he persuaded her to have hers laced also, and she agreed to a milder allowance after some misgiving. The man finished his basin and called for another, the rum being signalled for in yet stronger proportion. The effect of it was soon apparent in his manner, and his wife, but too sadly, perceived that in strenuously steering off the rocks of the licensed liquor tent, she had only got into maelstrom depths here amongst the smugglers. The child began to prattle impatiently, and the wife more than once said to her husband, "Michael, how about our lodging? You know we may have trouble in getting it if we don't go soon." But he turned a deaf ear to those bird-like chirpings. He talked loud to the company. The child's black eyes, after slow round, ruminating gazes at the candles when they were lighted, fell together. Then they opened. Then they shut again, and she slept. At the end of the first basin, the man had risen to serenity. At the second, he was jovial. At the third, argumentative. At the fourth, the qualities signified by the shape of his face, the occasional clench of his mouth, and the fiery spark of the dark eye, began to tell in his conduct. He was overbearing, even brilliantly quarrelsome. The conversation took a high turn, as it often does on such occasions. The ruin of good men by bad wives, and more particularly the frustration of many a promising youth's high aims and hopes, and the extinction of his energies by an early imprudent marriage, was the theme. "I did it for myself that way thoroughly," said the trusser with a contemplative bitterness that was well nigh resentful. "I married at 18, like the fool that I was, and this is the consequence of it." He pointed at himself and family with a wave of the hand intended to bring out the penuriousness of the exhibition. The young woman, his wife, who seemed accustomed to such remark, acted as if she did not hear them, and continued her intermittent private words of tender trifles to the sleeping and waking child, who was just big enough to be placed for a moment on the bench beside her when she wished to ease her arms. The man continued, "I haven't more than 15 shillings in the world, and yet I am a good, experienced hand in my line. I'd challenge England to beat me in the fodder business, and if I were a free man again, I'd be worth £1,000 before I done mote. But a fellow never knows these little things till all chance of acting upon 'em is past. The auctioneer selling the old horses in the field outside could be heard saying, "Now, this is the last lot. Now, who'll take the last lot for a song? Shall I say 40 shillings? 'Tis a very promising brood mare, a trifle over 5 years old, and nothing the matter with a hoss at all, except that she's a little hollier in the back and had her left eye knocked out by the kick of another, her own sister, coming along the road. For my part, I don't see why men who have got wives and don't want 'em shouldn't get rid of them as these gypsy fellas do their old horses," said the man in the tent. "Why shouldn't they put 'em up and sell 'em by auction to the men who are in need of such articles, eh? Why, begad, I'll sell mine this minute if anybody would buy her." "There's them that would do that," some of the guests replied, looking at the woman who was by no means ill-favoured. "True," said a smoking gentleman, whose coat had a fine polish about the collar, elbows, seams, and shoulder blades that long continued friction with grimy surfaces will produce, and which is usually more desired on furniture than on clothes. From his appearance, he had possibly been, in former time, groom or coachman to some neighbouring county family. "I've had my breedings in as good circles, I may say, as any man," he added. "And I know true cultivation, or nobody do. And I can declare she's got it, in the bone, mind ye, I say, as much as any female in the fair, though it may want a little bringing out." Then crossing his legs, he resumed his pipe with a nicely adjusted gaze at a point in the air. The fuddled young husband stared for a few seconds at this unexpected praise of his wife, half in doubt of the wisdom of his own attitude towards the possessor of such qualities. But he speedily lapsed into his former conviction and said harshly, "Well then, now's your chance. I'm open to an offer for this gem of creation." She turned to her husband and murmured, "Michael, you have taught this nonsense in public places before. A joke is a joke, but you may make it once too often, mind." "I know I've said it before. I meant it. All I want is a buyer." At the moment, a swallow, one among the last of the season, which had by chance found its way through an opening into the upper part of the tent, flew to and fro quick curves above their heads, causing all eyes to follow it absently. In watching the bird till it made its escape, the assembled company neglected to respond to the workman's offer, and the subject dropped. But a quarter of an hour later, the man who had gone on lacing his furmity more and more heavily, though he was either so strong-minded or such an intemperate toper that he was still appeared fairly sober, recurred to the old strain. As in a musical fantasy, the instrument fetches up the original theme. "Here, I'm waiting to know about this offer of mine. The woman is no good to me. Who'll have her?" The company had by this time decidedly degenerated, and the renewed inquiry was received with a laugh of appreciation. The woman whispered. She was imploring and anxious. "Come, come, it's getting dark, and this nonsense won't do. If you don't come along, I shall go without you. Come." She waited and waited, yet he did not move. In 10 minutes, The man broke in upon the desultory conversation of the furmity drinkers with, "I asked this question, and nobody answered to it. Will any Jack Rag or Tom Straw among ye buy my goods?" The woman's manner changed, and her face assumed the grim shape and colour of which mention has been made. Mike, she said, "this is getting serious. Oh, too serious." "Will anybody buy her?" said the man. "I wish somebody would," said she firmly. "Her present owner is not at all to her liking." "Nor you to mine," said he. "So we are agreed about that. Gentlemen, you hear? It's an agreement to part. She shall take the girl if she wants to, and go her ways. I'll take my tools and go my ways. It's simple as scripture history. Now then, stand up, Susan, and show yourself." "Don't, my child," whispered a buxom stay-lace dealer in voluptuous petticoats who sat near the woman. "Your good man don't know what he's saying." The woman, however, did stand up. "Now, who's auctioneer?" cried the hay-trusser. "I be," prompted answered the short man, with a nose resembling a copper knob, a damp voice, and his eyes like buttonholes. "Who'll make an offer for this lady?" The woman looked on the ground, as if she maintained her position by a supreme effort of will. "5 shillings, said someone, at which there was a laugh. "No insults," said the husband. "Who'll say a guinea?" Nobody answered, and the female dealer in stay-laces interposed. "Behave yourself, moral good man, for heaven's sake, love. Oh, what a cruelty is the poor soul married to. Bed and board is dear at some figures, upon my vason." "Set it higher, auctioneer," said the trusser. 2 guineas, said the auctioneer, and no one replied. "If they don't take her for that in 10 seconds, they'll have to give more," said the husband. "Very well. Now, auctioneer, add another. 3 guineas. Go in for 3 guineas, said the roomy man. "No bid," said the husband. "Good Lord. Why, she cost me 50 times the money for a penny. Go on, 4 guineas, cried the auctioneer. "I tell you what, I won't sell her for less than 5, said the husband, bringing down his fist so that the basins dance. "I'll sell her for 5 guineas to any man that will pay me the money and treat her well, and he shall have her forever, and never hear aught of me. But she shan't go for less. Now then, 5 guineas and she's yours. Susan, you agree?" She bowed her head with absolute indifference. Join me for the next video. Join me for the next episode, the next video of the Mayor of Casterbridge. And by the way, please subscribe and please share. I'll see you soon in the next video. Bye for now. Bye.